Wiener might make a political comeback, and on social media earlier I asked all y'all if you think this is possible. On Facebook, Adam J. Reinsner wrote, "Maybe if he sticks it out." That is not funny, Adam. That is not appropriate. I don't appreciate that. Also on Facebook, Ann Acard wrote, "His wife forgave him. That's all that matters. I don't think he broke any laws." That's true, Ann. Not only did he not break any laws, it's the only major political sex scandal with no actual sex. And imagine how long it's going to be before he gets any. In fact, these days I'm sure he covers up before he even touches his phone. If you have a comment for the show, tweet us at Viewpoint CTV or John Fugelsang, or use the hashtag Viewpoint, or post it on our Facebook page. All right. I held out as long as I could, but after a nice, long adult conversation about drugs, I need my fix. And joining me now to go to an even higher plane of our drug conversation is my panel of non-experts. Some of my favorites tonight. Comedian Paul Mercurio makes his first appearance. He'll be appearing in Connecticut at the Kate Theater and the Bridge Street Live Theater on April 12th and 13th, respectively. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, great to see you again.
Political satirist, host, and creator of the award-winning news parody series Absurdity Today. It's Julianna Forlano making her debut. Welcome.
Thanks.
And you all know this man, comedian and author of Moment of Clarity, Lee Camp, whose new Moment of Clarity web show can be seen at leecamp.net. What a pleasure to have all y'all here. Thanks. You saw our previous segment about the article in New York Magazine.
Yes.
Should we distinguish between these new designer drugs, which are serious drugs, and plants like marijuana and shrooms that apparently a loving God wants us to have? Why?
Hey, thanks for that during the break, by the way.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, it makes the panel a lot more interesting.
Oh man, I'm feeling good right now.
So why are these drugs held by most of our society on the same standard?
Yeah, they shouldn't be. Personally, I miss the good old days when drugs wanted to make you eat Doritos and not faces. You know, it's sort of the way it is. I mean, but the larger issue for me is there are legal things that are killing people that we're not regulating, like smoking and obesity in food. I think we need a psychedelic drug that sort of makes people look at broccoli and think they're eating a French fry. And I think we'd resolve a big issue in this country.
I think you can order that from China, I believe.
We might be able to genetically combine the two at this point.
Well,
exactly.
Fries and broccoli.
Exactly.
Well, it seems like the chemists were able to make a drug that could make you feel anyway. So to be able to feel like you might actually want to eat broccoli, that could be a real. We should get Eli Lilly in on this.
Well, it's actually true, or cocaine if you just want to lose weight fast. But even if we treat these designer drugs the same as marijuana or shrooms, should we? I mean, if your child came home with a designer drug, would your reaction be the same as if they came home with weed? Would it be worse? Is it equally bad?
I mean, first it would be like, I told you to bring weed home. Why didn't you bring weed home? Then when I get past that, yes, I think it's worse, and I think they should be in a different class of drugs. And I think this is obviously, the whole country is sort of moving toward legalization of medical marijuana or legalization of marijuana across the board. We have 2 states now. The thing that frightens me is that this is China's domain now. This was like one of our last core American industries, and we've lost this to China, making our own drugs. And I blame the public school systems for neglecting science, which has now left our meth manufacturers falling behind the Chinese.
We don't know how many people have been inspired by Breaking Bad, Paul.
Yes, couldn't China just stick to poisoning our cats and dogs? Why did they have to move forward?
But I mean, if you look at it, like, none of our drug laws really make any sense, right? I mean, it's supposed to be when it can cause harm to you or to society, but you look at the stuff that's legal, like some of the side effects of prescription drugs. Is anal leakage not causing harm to society?
Exactly. That's a molester in your potato chips. But here's the thing. As I mentioned in the last segment, a new poll showed that 52% of the American people now favor decriminalizing cannabis. I try to say that instead of legalizing marijuana. Here's my question. And by the way, that is the conservative point of view. It's only been illegal for some 70 years. Will we ever see a president willing to do that? Because my whole point is the last 3 presidents have been vague at best about their drug usage. If these 3 presidents really thought it was bad to do these drugs and kept locking people up for smoking weed, why wouldn't they turn themselves in for being guilty of the same infractions when they were younger men?
Yeah, they're only going to do what's politically expedient. They're not. If Big Pharma says it's a good idea and the lobbyists are behind them, they'll do it. If not, they won't.
You need to get big money behind it. I mean, you know, one could argue that, you know, gay marriage has sort of made the strides that it's made because, you know, these politicians wanted the vote of gay Americans.
Of course.
And so if you incentivize them through some kind of a marijuana lobby, which is really, the money's only going to come from CEOs. And the problem with being a CEO is it's okay to steal people's pension, but admit that you smoke Panama Red and you're fired.
I was part of the marijuana lobby, but I forgot when Election Day was. But this goes over to you, Lee, because you know what I'm going to say now. Big Pharma would have something to say about this, because cannabis is not like other plants. I mean, it's only a drug when Pfizer can make it a little white powder and turn it into a pill. But if you have legalized cannabis that folks can grow in their backyard, that's going to put a dent in someone's pocketbook.
Or if Big Pharma started selling black lights, you know, then they could make some money off it. But no, it's true. I mean, the money's not there for them, and like it's also just a way to just imprison so many people. I mean, the laws need to change so that we don't have 25% of the world's prisoners in our jails.
Exactly. We had Ben Jealous on last night talking about just that, and the prison industrial complex, something else our wonderful president we all respect has never mentioned.
The Lieutenant Governor of California, by the way, said that he was having an off-camera conversation with his fellow politicians, and the one thing they all agree on is should be legalized is pot. Like off the record, they're all willing to say that, but none of them want to say it on the record yet.
Well, he said it on Current on his own TV show, but no one heard it. Speaking of legal, actually, I kid. Gavin is a wonderful, brilliant man. I would vote for him in a second. Okay, speaking of legalizing drugs, Rand Paul. Paul traveled to Howard University, an historically black college today, as part of the GOP's outreach to minorities. Overall, it was a civil discussion. One guy was thrown out for trying to put up a sign that read, "Howard University does not support white supremacists." But perhaps the most shocking part came when Paul was asked about the Civil Rights Act.
I've never questioned the Civil Rights Act and never come out in opposition to the Civil Rights Act.
Really?
I don't like the idea of telling private business owners. I abhor racism. I think it's a bad business decision to ever exclude anybody from your restaurant. But at the same time, I do believe in private ownership.
So I abhor racism. Go for it. Wasn't that something the Civil Rights Act focused on? I mean, Rand Paul, I admire him for going. I think he's one of the few Republican senators with the stones to go to Howard and speak. But it was very disingenuous. He really was talking about how Republicans helped set up the NAACP, Republicans ended slavery, and it's like, no, liberal Republicans did that. It's always been historically the conservative Democrats and conservative Republicans who have opposed civil rights. Juliana?
And it also doesn't really matter who did what historically. It's who's doing what now. Who is trying to marginalize voting. That's not the Democratic Party. They succeed when everyone gets to vote. But when people are marginalized, who succeeds? Who wins out of that?
He went there and told the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. It was just someone else's truth. So,
well, could this help? I mean, could Rand Paul going to Howard help the GOP get minority voters?
I mean, I guess. I mean, they call him the new Republican, which I guess means you excuse racism more than you excuse rape. And, there's sort of this idea that I read through the speech as well, and it just felt like a lot of platitudes. And the scary thing is it's the party of the great emancipator, and he has to stand in front of a bunch of African Americans and tell them it's still their party. And as an eye surgeon, I think that's a guy who's got bad vision, you know?
Well, and some of us who saw the Lincoln movie know this is not the same party.
Yeah.
Well, and how about Mr. The government and authorities should be out of our lives, but he sure seemed glad to have them there when they were tackling the guy with the sign.
Exactly. Okay, after the break, this discussion is going to end the way all political discussions end now, with Nazis. It's coming up next. Tonight's F-bomb. There's been a lot of exaggerated inflammatory rhetoric about gun control recently. And let me tell you something. Exaggerated inflammatory rhetoric is worse than Hitler. One of the strangest memes to arise is that Hitler was really big on gun safety laws. And the first thing the Nazis did when they took power was outlaw firearms and snatch guns like liberals. And if you don't believe me on this, go on Twitter and search Hitler and gun control. See the response to Senator Pat Toomey and Joe Manchin's bipartisan gun safety plan from the American illiterati. Or take a look at this recent poster that compares the Third Reich to Americans who want to save American lives by supporting popular and mild gun safety reforms in the wake of the Newtown massacre. Rush Limbaugh, by the way, uses this for porn. Now, as far as I'm concerned, anybody who compares people they disagree with to Hitler is a complete Nazi. But because you may have to deal with folks like this in your family or at your job, or maybe the next time you're at the same outpatient clinic as Alex Jones, it's worth looking into. Because they did have gun registration and licensing in Germany before Hitler took power. After Germany was defeated in World War I under the Treaty of Versailles, they passed a law in 1919 that pretty much banned private ownership of firearms, and Germany's center-left government did confiscate guns. And if Adolf had been a more successful painter, it might have stayed that way. But in 1938, the Nazi government government almost totally deregulated the acquisition and transfer of rifles and shotguns. Permit lengths were extended from 1 year to 3, and the legal age of purchase was lowered from 20 to 18. Nazi Party members were exempt from any gun regulation, and they even dropped the limit of firearms one could own. That's right, Hitler was anti-gun control. He did ban guns for some people, Germany's Jews. Hitler defined citizenship in ethnic terms, so since Jews were no longer legally German, they couldn't take advantage of his relaxed gun laws. Does that sound, my friends, anything like background checks for criminals? Or a ban on high-capacity ammo clips while you're duck hunting? See, right-wing media is not going to tell you this. They want their followers to believe Hitler was a liberal because he belonged to the National Socialist Party. But the National Socialists were not liberal. They just really liked cabaret shows. And most historians agree they were socialist in name only. In 1933, when he took power, Hitler famously said, "We must close union offices, confiscate their money, reduce workers' salaries, and take away their right to strike." I know, just like Bernie Sanders, right? Hitler banned labor unions, took away collective bargaining rights, because sometimes it's a fine line between Chancellor of Germany and Governor of Wisconsin. He substantially increased the German economy's military spending and believed in using force to dominate the world, invading countries that never attacked him. Nowadays, we call that preemptive war. And in case you didn't know, Hitler hated the gays so much he could have had his own show on modern AM radio. Don't take my word for it. Google all this stuff. The Nazi big lie theory continues to play out, especially among guys who draw Hitler mustaches on pictures of Barack Obama for their protest marches. But remember, somewhere in hell, Hitler is furious at these right-wing American guys for painting his stash on a black dude. But don't worry, he'll tell him when he sees him. That's Viewpoint for tonight. I want to thank my panel. Comedian Paul Mercurio, performing in Connecticut this Friday and Saturday at the Kate Theater and the Bridge Street Live Theater. The luminous Julianna Forlano of Absurdity Today. The brilliant Lee Camp of the Moment of Clarity web show on leecamp.net. Tomorrow, folks, we have Phil Donahue and Bill Donahue of the Catholic League on the same show. This is Viewpoint. I'm John Fugelsang. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great evening, everyone. Good night, Mom.